Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Enid Lader, and I'm the rabbi at Beth Israel, the West Temple. And it is a humble honor for me to welcome you this afternoon to this memorial service for Michael Montlack on behalf of his family. Death has taken our beloved Michael. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Michael's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for his companionship that we shared along life's path, and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness, and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ever new message of God's nearness. It tells us of our kinship with the Creator, in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in death as in life. The 23rd Psalm. Adonai roi lo echsar, binot eshet yor bitzeni, al me menuchot yenahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev, yancheni b'ma'aglet tzedek lama'an shemo. Gam ki elech b'ketzal mavet, lo irara, ki ata himati. Shiftecha umishantecha, hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai, deshanta v'shemen roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yurdifuni, koya mechayai, v'shabti bevet Adonai lehorech, Yamin. Dear God and Shepherd, your flock, and guide us, your flock, with love and compassion. If in our grief and desolation we grow distant, do not abandon us, but draw us closer to you. Grant solace and comfort to those who mourn. May they sustain each other with the blessing of memory, the memory of the life of their beloved Michael. In the valley of the shadow of death, beside the still waters and in green pastures, you, Adonai, are our shepherd. Be our strength, our shield, our guide, and be our comfort throughout all our days. And let us say, Amen. Esainai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak. We need light when gloom darkens our lives. We need fortitude and courage when pain and loss assail us. May we find these in God who preserves from destruction all is good. Let us find them too in loved ones and companions who do God's work by binding up the wounds of the stricken. By Rabbi Rami Shapiro, we are loved by an unending love. We are embraced by arms that find us even when we are hidden from ourselves. We are touched by fingers that soothe us even when we are too proud for soothing. We are counseled by voices that guide us even when we are too embittered to hear. We are loved by an unending love. We are supported by hands that uplift us even in the midst of a fall. We are urged on by eyes that meet us even when we are too weak for meeting. We are loved by an unending love. Embraced, touched, soothed, and counseled. Ours are the arms, the fingers, the voices. Ours are the hands, the eyes, and the smiles. We are loved by an unending love. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mevarach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, and that there is strength in faith. With Job we say, Adonai Natan, God, you have given us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in Michael's life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai Lakach, God, you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love, as we now say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach, blessed be the name of God, now and forever. It is a true testament to the impact of a person's life when brother, nephew, son-in-law, and grandchildren offer to speak at his funeral. It is my honor to begin with sharing about Michael, and then I will be followed by his brother Ken, his grandchildren Jada, Monty, Zach, Owen, and Miles, his nephew Andy, and his son-in-law Paul. Yesterday, I had the privilege of sitting with Carol, Lainey, Dana, Kurt, Wendy, Leslie, Butch, and good friend Shelley Sedlak. We sat and shared stories and memories of Michael, husband and father and grandfather, businessman, golfer, and really an all-around nice guy. Michael Montlack was born in Hungary with what people would call a natural tan and a head full of hair. His parents, Morris and Esther Montlack, emigrated to the United States and settled on the west side of Cleveland in Lakewood. Today, Lakewood prides itself on being an open and welcoming suburb of Cleveland, but back then it was not so. And Michael and his brother felt the sting of anti-Semitism, so much so that their mother signed them up for boxing lessons, and she took them too. They ended up moving to the east side, joined Silver's Temple, the Temple Tifereth Israel, and the Beachmont Country Club, hanging up their boxing gloves for golf clubs. Playing golf was a lifelong passion of Michael's. He was the man on the street for his father's real estate business. Like Kurt would become the man on the street for his father. Michael was a real dreamer, had many ideas, and was very persistent. He continued his father's real estate business, bringing his dreams to reality. From shopping malls to golf courses, business properties to apartment complexes, and I am sure everything in between. Montlack Realty Properties can be found in Cleveland, Shaker Heights, Cleveland Heights, Lakewood, and Berea and Kent, and in other parts of the country. He loved making deals. As he and his brother Ken continued the business from their father, so Kurt has done from his father for the past 20 years and built it up even more. And Michael loved people. He could talk with anyone in a room and make them feel like they were the only one there. He spoke with janitors and doctors, lawyers and housekeepers alike. Everyone was important. There's a Jewish teaching to judge each person on the balance of their merit, and that was Michael. He always wanted to give people a chance, and helping people get a chance. For example, when he needed a roofer, he would drive to the Kinsman area and find a roofer. And Michael enjoyed his food. I am sure he enjoyed fine food and fine restaurants, but truthfully, bring him to Big Al's or a Waffle House, the antithesis of fancy, and he was very happy. His drink of choice was iced tea. 2 glasses of iced tea with 2 glasses of ice and 20 packets of Splenda. In his past, it had not been the case. But Michael was very proud of his 28-year membership in Alcoholics Anonymous. He was sober at the age of 52 and maintained that until the very end of his life. 27 of those years have been spent with Carol by his side. They met through their good friend Shelley Sedlak. There is a recollection about Carol seeing Michael at the supermarket. He had a bucket of shrimp from which he was snacking, dressed in, well, you know how Michael dressed. He was relaxed, and his clothing reflected that. There was no pretense to Michael. What you saw was what you got, and you accepted him the way he was. He was very nice and very giving. Carol described him as a tough businessman and an easygoing husband. He was fine with her going out to this or that, but she should only stop on her way home and pick up a little something for him to eat. Maybe some chocolate cake from this great little place in the West Side Market. After they were married, they joined Beth Israel the West Temple, and Michael saw the need for landscaping and generously landscaped the front of our property, which happens to face the front of Montlack property, Stewart House Apartments, directly across the street from our temple. Our parking lot is not very large, and Michael was always generous in letting us use the apartment lot for our overflow parking needs. And his family's quiet generosity extends to this day. His family asked me to include Maggie, the dog he never had growing up, but the Doberman Pinscher who rode with him on all his drives from this property to that, in all the neighborhoods, his watchdog. Michael came into a room with energy. He loved his family, his parents and his brother and his children and his grandchildren. He felt comfortable and at ease with his family and friends. What values did Michael leave with us? Don't be afraid to try new things. Be persistent, the importance of family, ask plenty of questions, and buy low. Michael loved life and celebrations and would want us to carry on his values and live our lives to the fullest. Zichrono livracha, may his memory be for a blessing. I would now like to invite his brother Ken.
Good afternoon. My big brother, Michael, was 2 years older than me. For the first half of our youth, we grew up on Lakeland Avenue in 1940s Lakewood. Actually, with some little problems that we heard about. We really liked our little neighborhood, and it still is a place that we feel special about. My big brother taught me just about everything. He taught me to catch and hit a ball. He watched out for me. He picked the Saturday matinee movies that we went to, and never complained that this little kid tagged along with him. He generally showed me how the world works. Mike was the high-energy kid on Lakeland. He was the one that the other kids and me wanted to hang out with. He was the one who led the paper collection drives. He pulled our little red wagon house to house collecting tin cans for the war effort. He was the one, I want you to remember that didn't have anything to do with setting that tree on fire that required the Lakewood Fire Department's help. At 9 and 11 years of age, we moved across town to Shaker, where life was so much more sophisticated. And Mike still kept looking out for me. And that happened all through our childhood. Even in college, Big Brother brought Ken for weekends where he imparted all the values of higher education. After college, Mike worked hard and long to become, finally, a successful real estate broker and rental management CEO. And through those years of work, and mostly through his amazing, innate understanding of people and connecting with people, he made this business grow, and grow it did. And Mike grew that family management business with a focus that he never lost, not to the very end, even as his health declined. And of course, he shared his experience and his knowledge and his advice with his family, certainly with his kids, with his grandchildren, and yes, with his little brother. All the while, Mike always took care of his family, showing them all of his love and generosity. Well, Big Brother, you left your family, and that includes me, with all the fruits of your work and your love, and with memories that are priceless. You did good, Big Brother. I miss you. Thank you.
I would like to invite Michael's grandchildren to come up.
Okay, so me and Jada and I are going to share some stories with our grandpa. So one day we were going to his house in Florida. And we were sleeping in a zebra tent right next to his room. We woke him up at probably 3 or 4 in the morning, and he took us to Waffle House in the middle of the night.
And we got to Waffle House, and there was, nobody there. And we're sitting at the bar, and I order a root beer float and waffles at 2 o'clock in the morning. And after the waiter takes my meal, she leans over to me, and she says, "Are you okay? Do you know this man? Do you need me to call the police?" 'Cause he's in his robe, and we're in our pajamas. We look like we've been kidnapped or something. And, yeah. Okay.
And then we have another story. We were eating dinner at Beachmont. Jada and I desperately wanted to ride in the golf cart. So we went to the pro shop. They were just closing up, and we asked them, and they said no. So then we walked back to Grandpa, and Grandpa said Come on, guys, get in the golf cart quick. Don't let them notice.
So we got in the golf cart and I started driving on the cart path. And he's like, okay, well, now they just got in a golf cart and they're starting to follow us. So he's like, okay, you're going to have to drive onto the fairway. So we go onto the fairway at like 8 o'clock at night. Nobody's on it. And he's like, okay, well, now we're going to have to go on the green. So then we start driving a golf cart on the green. And then we lost them, basically. And we had to go through the woods onto the other side of the golf course.
And then, once we threw them off, I was mad because I never got to drive.
Michael was a great man. We are so lucky to have him. He'll always be with us. That's short.
Thank you. His nephew, Andy.
From the earliest I can remember, Kara and I associated my Uncle Mike with movies and stories. My sister, Kara, and I both agreed that Gene Hackman's Royal Tannenbaum, spitballing, we could shimmy up that gutter, jump over that window ledge, and pry open that ventilator shaft, carried some of Mike's DNA. When I was a kid, to have Uncle Mike join the proceedings was to go from the black and white of Kansas to the Technicolor of Oz. To be around him was to be in a Fellini film. I remember a group of kids blowing into a pizza place on Halloween in costume at 10 p.m. when every other child our age was in for the night. Ordering our pizza was a grown man dressed in tails, wearing a Dracula mask. Our guardian, Uncle Mike. The cashier looked like she thought they were about to get held up. Then she burst out laughing along with everyone else. I remember at 4 or 5, motorboating through the Bay of Hollywood, Florida, full throttle, our skipper, ignoring any norms of maritime safety, and aiming for every white cap he could hit. Michael bounced us off the biggest wave he could find. The boat launched into the air, fiberglass slamming my forehead, giving me a goose egg. It wasn't the last. I remember terrassing across the Beachmont Links one Father's Day. Mike pulled about 5 Gs, sending our golf cart hard left. I went straight. It was right out of Caddyshack. Back in the day, turbulence was the price of admission into Michael's circus. Although Dana, Kurt, Laney, Leslie, Wendy, Brady, and Kara and I ate together, watched movies together, bowled together, swam together, laughed together, and have cried together, I'm not sure I can fairly speak to what it was to relate to that turbulence as one of Mike's kids, but I can speak for Kara and myself when I say, yeah, we got a little bit roughed up, but what would it have cost us not to? What would we have missed in the name of a purely antiseptically tranquil youth? A friend of mine who teaches undergraduate art said a few years back that her millennial students now just wanted to be told what to do and how to do it. They didn't want to take any personal initiative. They didn't want to take risks. Art students, risk is the cost of living fully, the cost of adventure, the cost of creation. I can't say that Michael's behavior as a role model in my childhood was always balanced and dependable. But now, as a 45-year-old father, I can express gratitude to him for instilling in me a sense of personal gonzo initiative, of getting out of my box, having an adventure, and making something where there appeared to be nothing. Life sure was more interesting with Michael in it. And it stayed interesting even after he got sober. I don't know who else could invite Dana, Kurt, Laney, Kara, and me to an AA meeting at a Telluride, Colorado Music Festival and wind up sitting us across a coffee table from James Taylor. Hi, my name is James. You couldn't make this stuff up. I remember calling Michael up. I was in my 20s to ask for some help housing a New York actor for a film I was shooting. Hi, Mike, it's Andy. No, move it left. What do you need? Is this a bad time to... What do you need? No, over. Well, it's Glenn, my actor, who's going to be flying in tonight. Can I leave the key with... Carol, take the phone. Andy. Hey, Carol, what's going on? What's going on? Michael spotted some boulders while we were driving to the west side for lunch. Now he's got a pneumatic crew engaging them in the yard. Fellini. Even when Michael wasn't living story, he was breathing it, creating it, with his unbelievable self-fulfilling optimism that all things were possible. He loved spitballing ideas, no matter how bonkers. When I was 5, it was, sure, there are haunted castles. I know where there's one in Berea. Let's go. Of course, there wasn't one in Berea, and if there was, why would it be next to the strip mall that he and my dad were interested in? When I was 12, it was, let's buy that Board of Education building. We're going to buy it and turn it into a movie studio. Who cared? He loved winding kids up, and we loved to get wound up. Did he occasionally go a little overboard with it? One time on a family road trip, he told me a ghost story about my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-Aunt Esther, who was a wicked witch. Now, I'd never heard of this relative before or since. I only knew of 2 Esthers in our family. One of them was his mother, who was sitting in the front seat. I'm not saying there was a connection, but he knew his mother and I were having some tension over food. I was a picky eater, and Grandma didn't like having her pot pie declined by anyone. So, Uncle Mike tells me this great, the number of greats kept changing. Aunt Esther was a witch who fed people poison food and killed them, and she got her head chopped off and the rest of her stuffed in a locker, and then she came back, headless to this day, haunting the midnight bedrooms of frightened kids. I was like 6. Now, that didn't go over too well with the grown-ups, but again, we loved it. And Michael succeeded in a business and a market where many others have struggled. Because here, too, he exuded that wonderful optimism and total confidence, that chutzpah. It'll be great because we're here doing it. Me, Michael, and you, Bob or Carol or the kids or Kenny or whoever, all of us here, family, friends, partners. That's not some kind of trainable pitchmanship you teach someone, though God knows Michael tried. No, that was Michael in his essence. He was a natural. I came to know Michael a second time when I was no longer a boy, and he had decided he needed to make some changes. We know the old adage, an unexamined life isn't worth living. He and I talked. Actually, no, he talked. I listened. He told some truthful, painful stories. What they were doesn't matter that much anymore. But that he wanted to talk openly, to share, does. He was, I think, maybe for the first time, trying to tell a new type of story, a story about why he was the way he was. I don't know whether he fully succeeded, and I'll admit to feeling a certain guilty, short-term disappointment over losing the Uncle Mike of my youth. Something analogous to, why did Woody Allen ever have to switch from comedy to drama? But I know he became happier and clearer about what was important in his life. And I'm glad I got to know that Michael as well. He wasn't perfect then, and he sure as hell wasn't perfect before. But my God, did he not give us our best stories? We've all heard them so many times. A man coasting a car, no gas, dead engine, a mile down the freeway at probably 2 miles an hour, just making it into the first gas station in 100 miles. The 6-year-old hellion coming home to his mother as the wails of a fleet of fire trucks begin to fill the neighborhood. His behavior extra good, extra quiet, so his mother knows something's up. Michael, did you set a fire? The little boy in tears fessing up. It could be from A Christmas Story. A father on a road trip with his 3 young kids, picking up a hitchhiker, striking up a conversation, and then deciding, out of boredom, to bring that stranger along on their vacation. I think it's fair to say that those of us who lived these stories experienced some discomfort, some hurt, maybe some existential panic, and yet the stories go on. The stories go on because we tell them over and over and over. You know, there's a lesser-known corollary to that adage, an unexamined life isn't worth living, and that is, an unlived life isn't worth examining. And Michael lived. And we lived with him when we were with him. And now those stories live in us, because those stories Michael gave us are part of who we are. They are his parting, lasting gift to us, who all would have been duller, poorer schmucks had we not climbed aboard, fastened our seatbelts, and ridden it all out with him.
And Michael's son-in-law, Paul.
Well, following Andy's not going to be easy, maybe impossible, but one of the great things about Michael was when he told a story, he would tell it over and over again, usually in the same sitting, so I'm going to do the same thing for Andy. As Andy said, some people are perfect to a fault, and I'm not so sure that that's how anyone in this room would describe Michael. As you have heard, there are a million funny stories about him because that's who he was, and he was also a great storyteller. Now, I'm going to tell some stories, but I'll try and do it a little bit different than Michael. As in, well, I will be long-winded, but I won't be as loud or as super slow as he'd explain things to you, repeating himself over and over with lots and lots of hand gestures. So I'm here to represent the Montlack children, an honor that I share with Lainey, Dana, Kurt, Ann, Butch, Wendy, and Leslie. My first introduction to Michael was 20 years ago. I was a surgical intern in Vermont, and I had 3 days off for Thanksgiving, which was basically a miracle within itself, and I was given about a day and a half ahead of time. And Lainey was living in San Francisco, and I knew she was staying in Cleveland for Thanksgiving. So, you know, I had to see Lainey because I was madly in love with her, and I decided I would just surprise him and show up in Cleveland. So I land in Hopkins, I get in a cab, the cab gets lost, and now my whole show is blown. So I have to call, and they explain to the cab how to get there, and I show up, And in the window was about 150 people, all in their house, all with the sign up that says, "Welcome, Krakowitz," which was misspelled. So, now the house had a lot of people in it. There were two of Michael's wives, which I thought was interesting, and a bunch of family. At least I thought it was family. The truth was, it was just a bunch of cast of characters that Michael and Carol had collected over the years, and I'm sure many of them are here today. Now, I did think it was interesting to have Thanksgiving with your ex and with his husband, but, well, if you know Michael, of course he does things like that. So that's when I first realized that this real estate golfer never met a stranger, and he never lost a friend, no matter what he did. And as Andy said, he did a lot. And that's when I first realized that he wasn't perfect to a fault. In truth, his imperfections are what made him such a lovable grandfather, father, business partner, and friend. Michael not only accepted his imperfections, but he learned from them, and he never tried to hide them. I never knew the pre-AA Michael. I only knew the Michael after, and I can tell you he was quite an entertaining guy. In fact, he displayed his personal flaws just so everybody else could learn from them, and he was a truly open person. So let's go back to the house. So here I am. I walk in, and it's very overwhelming for anyone. And I meet Carol, and I meet Rita, and I meet Shelley, and I meet Wendy, and I meet Howard, and I meet all these characters. And after things settled down for a while, I finally meet Michael. And everyone was very welcoming, and Michael really never tried to force himself on me, to introduce himself. So in time, he asked if Lainey and I would go to dinner, and I'm thinking, okay, well, we're going to dinner. It's Thanksgiving. It's going to be some sort of fancy meal. And he did take us to his fanciest restaurant, which, of course, was Tommy's. So everybody knows Michael loved Tommy's, and he had true passion about Coventry as he had about anything that had to do with real estate. But this was my first introduction into how Michael ordered. And it's interesting. Whenever he would meet a waitress, he'd call him over and he'd say, "Hi, I'm Michael. What's your name?" And then once he had their name, he had them hooked. And he'd say, do you have any Splenda? This goes, Rabbi brought this up. So they'd bring a packet. And he didn't measure Splenda in packets. He measured it in finger holds. He said, "No, I need about this many," which he would then reorder over and over. So the weekend ended, and we all said goodbye. And, I grew up in a family that we weren't really big huggers. In fact, we kind of just said goodbye. But Michael gave me this big hug, which I thought was very nice. And then he leaned in, and I thought, oh, what's this? And he leaned in like he was going to kiss me, and I kind of panicked, and I turned my head, and I locked lips with Michael. And I'd say that was my welcome to Michael Montlack. And it was then I realized that it wouldn't matter. He wouldn't size me up. He was going to love me because his daughter loved me, and it didn't matter because he respected her, and so it didn't even respect anybody he was with. Now, I have a couple stories that I also want to tell, and I'm going to tell one about our dog, Betty. So when Lainey and I first moved to Cleveland, we were going on vacation, and we didn't know what to do with our dog. This was before we had kids, and of course everybody thinks their dog's the most important thing at that point in life. So Lainey went to her dad and asked if he would watch the dog, but secretly we were really hoping Carol would watch the dog. And Lainey gave very specific details to her dad. Said, "Dad, do not leave her alone outside because she will chase the squirrel into the road and end up dead on North Park." So Michael said, "Don't worry, honey, don't worry, honey." We leave, and what does Michael do? Well, Michael liked to jerry-rig things, so he put her on a leash and he tucked the handle underneath this heavy wrought iron chair. And then he went inside to, fix himself a snack, which I'm sure he deservedly earned, and a cup of Splenda with a little bit of iced tea. And lo and behold, Betty sees a squirrel because the yard is filled with them, because that's all Carol does is feed squirrels and geese and anything else that come around. And Betty took off with the wrought iron chair, bouncing over their yard, and Michael's watching this in his robe, of course, through the window, and he immediately runs out and starts to chase the dog, but she's gone. So what's he do? Does he stop to change? Of course not. He jumps right into his car, and he goes out and starts asking everybody where the dog is. And if anybody knows Michael and his robes, he wasn't a big fan of tying them very tight. So that was probably one of his bigger secrets in life, which was to allow everybody to get to know him as well as possible. Fortunately, he brought the dog back and everything was fine. So Michael was a car guy as well, but not the kind of car guy that the rest of us think about. He was a type of car guy who could care less about a car, and I think he secretly loved to flaunt how crappy his cars could be. In fact, Michael really didn't care about what people thought about his appearance at all, outside of his David Jacobson shoes that he was very proud of. Despite this, his membership to as many fancy golf clubs and country clubs, he could care less about materialism. So not so quick story about Michael and cars. We went to Bonita to visit Michael and Carol, and he asked me, he's like, hey, can you give me a ride? I'm like, okay. So here we go. We're going to go pick up his Wagoneer, the Muppet Mobile. And it's about 12 years old. And he said, yeah, I got it painted at Mako. And I thought Mako went out of business in the 80s. But Michael had found one about an hour outside of Bonita. And I think he shelled out about $200 to get the car painted. So we get into Carol's car, and of course there's a tape in the tape deck, and it is on the psychology of putting, which is when I really learned about golf and how passionate he was about it. So I listened to this, and he's peppering me with questions about life and asking me all kinds of things. We finally pull into this Mako, and I'm telling you, it is way out in the outskirts of town. And, you know, he had already given them very specific instructions on how he wanted his car done. And I think John Ryan, and if Lodi was here, would probably be shaking their head in agreement that he knew how to tell people what to do. So here is Michael, and he's dressed in his usual fancy attire, except for he has a shirt on this time and a pair of shorts, which reminds me that he had a habit of whenever his back was bothering him, that he would just stop and do his stretches. And later on, he was wearing those same pair of shorts, and we were in an eyeglass store, and that's when I found out that he wasn't a real big fan of underwear. But that's a whole other story. So naive me, I think we're just going to show up and pick up the car, and it's going to be no big deal. But no, Michael starts going over the car with the guys. He calls them out, and they go over every inch of the car. The little bit of paint that's splattered on the fender that's completely dented in. The paint that's on the bald tires. And he busts their balls for like a half hour. He probably got another $100 knocked off. I get into Carol's car, and I can't believe what I've just been exposed to. And here's Michael, Q-tip Jufro, overly tan face, turns to click the engine, dead. Car's completely dead. So what's he do? He gets out completely unembarrassed, and he's like, hiya, has anyone got a jump? So anyway, we drive home, and we get back to the house, and of course the car dies again, and he's like, let's go to the movie. He tells Elaine, he's like, let's go to the movies and go get dinner. And I'm like, well, the car doesn't work, right? But he gets it jumped, and we go, and we pull into the mall. And I'm like, Michael, you know, the car, the battery keeps dying. And he's like, no, there's no problem. He just shoots me this smile, leaves the car running. We go in and eat. We go to the movie, and I'm thinking somebody's going to steal this car, and whoever it is has to listen to that putting tape. But of course, we come out, and the car's sitting there, and it's totally fine. And as Andy said, when it came to Michael and driving cars, he liked adventure. If it meant trying to race the gate at Bonita Springs or waiting until the check engine light or the low fuel light came on, he'd still just put the car in neutral and let it coast down a hill. But that's the way he was. And he loved to do, in fact, when it came to some of his favorite things, he also loved to tell us about whatever his favorite restaurant was, which at one point was Sneaky Pete's in Florida. And he would always say the same thing. No matter what the food was, he's like, this is the best burger. You have to have their burger. Everywhere, by the way, had the best burger, which I learned later in life. And I hate burgers. But he would talk them up so much that I would, eventually order one, and they would always taste terrible. But he didn't care, because for him, any food that was in front of him was good, and particularly if it meant a little story in the middle of the night. So vacations are some of my favorite stories about Michael. From the dream vacation he took Lainey and the kids on with the Nakuru Tooth to Africa story, But Andy touched on my favorite all-time story with just a little bit about Michael and their trip out to the western states. So it went something like this. Michael had just divorced Rita, and it's summertime. And he has a second grader, a fourth grader, and a sixth grader. So what's he decide to do? Rent an RV. Makes sense, right? Who wouldn't do that? Now you just have to understand we're following the logic of Michael. So somehow he finds this guy, Toby, who had a brand new RV, and God knows how he found it, but he did. And the guy was very, very specific, how he wanted this car returned. So how would you get to Denver if you were going to go out west? You'd take a train, right? Who wouldn't take a train? So Michael loads up his second, fourth, and sixth graders. The little, I'm sure Kurt wasn't so cute, but Dana and Laney, very cute at the time. And he leaves, and the train starts to leave, and where's Michael? And there go the kids looking out the window. And eventually Michael comes running up, and at the last second, of course, jumps on the train. They get there, they get to Denver, they go to Toby's house, they pick up this new RV, and one of the specific things and it said, you have to bring this RV back exactly the way you left it. Well, Michael always liked to make enhancements and changes on things, and nothing was ever exactly perfect. So what did he do? He immediately drove to a car stereo store and put an 8-track player in, and he told the kids they could each get their own 8-track, which I'm sure was great. And then he picked up a pair of headphones for himself, so he didn't have to hear the kids, which I can understand. So sometimes when they would get very annoying, he would just leave for a while, and he'd take some Michael time, and the kids would be in the RV waiting and wondering if he'd ever come back. But I think this is what gave such a special bond between Kurt, Laney, and Dana as they tried to survive the adventures of Michael. But they did do a lot of amazing things on this trip. They went to Utah, they went to the Tetons, they went to Wyoming, they went to Yellowstone. And as I said, Michael never met a stranger, and it's been said many times a day. And as Andy said, it probably wasn't a great idea in an RV to pick up hitchhikers, but he would do that and keep them for a few days. They had all kinds of other adventures. Laney decided with her curly hair that she wanted to look like Dorothy Hamilton and get a shag, which apparently didn't go so well. Dana was supposed to get the same haircut, but she reneged after she saw how bad it looked. There's so many other stories about Michael on the campsite when he met the nice Mormons next door and had them over and spiked the punch and sent them all home, staggering back to their campsite. But by far the best of all of these stories in my mind is the ice cream story on this trip. So the kids have been bugging Michael that they wanted ice cream, and I don't think this was too far into the trip. And Michael liked ice cream too, so eventually he acquiesced. So Dana's in the front seat, Laney and Kurt are in the back, and Michael sees an ice cream place. And unlike the rest of us who would take the road, he decides to cut through the parking lot of the motel, except there was an overhang on the motel, and the overhang happened to be just a little bit lower than the air conditioning unit that then went into the RV roof. But does Michael stop? Of course not. He just keeps going. He buys some ice cream, and the kids are looking out horrified as everybody in the motel comes outside to see. Of course, it rained a lot on this trip, and Michael, in his Michael way, just put the sleeping bags out to catch the rain and put buckets down as well. And I am sure when he returned that van, or the RV to Toby, that there were probably a few words that were exchanged. But knowing Michael, he just shrugged it off. So as I said, Michael never met a stranger, and he had a huge heart. If it was the guys on the corner looking for a job or the Big Al employees, he never judged. He just gave everyone a chance. Despite this, everyone knew who his favorite was. It was Laney, and it was Kurt, and it was Ann, and it was Dana, and it was Wendy, and it was Leslie, and it was Butch, and it was Zach, and it was Monty, and it was Miles, and it's Jada, and it's Owen, and it's Kara, and it's Andy, and it's probably John Ryan too. The truth is, everybody was Michael's favorite because he made you feel that way, because he was warm, and he was loving, and he was completely non-judgmental. He made everyone feel like they were his favorite because he listened. And Carol, the love he had for you was complete, and it was very obvious the way you guys were together. He shared this with all the way he shared with you, And the way Fred would open his heart and you opened his heart to him was really nice. And all those imperfections seemed to be kind of perfect with the two of you. You guys always had an open door policy, which I'm completely appreciative of, and so were the rest of us, particularly as Michael was sick. We would walk in this house at any morning, any evening, any time, and Carol never said a word. She just opened the house and gave us a hug. So Carol's fond of saying they broke the mold after Michael. And I've given this a lot of thought, and I think I disagree with you, because I see a lot of Michael all around this room. It's in his kids, it's in his grandkids, and it's in me. So Michael, from all of us, we love you, and we love the way you lived your life. And I knew you for 20 years, and the way you lived, I think you got some extra time, probably out of all that Splenda. But I wish we just had another 20 more. So when you're up there, tell Lloydie to do whatever you've got to tell Lloydie to do to boss him around. And while you're playing around with the original Monty and Esther, I hope those tapes on the psychology of putting help you up there as well.
Beautiful. Oh God, you have given us loved ones and have made them the strength of our life, the light of our eyes. They depart and leave us bereft on a lonely way, but you are the living fountain from which our healing flows. To you the stricken look for comfort and the sorrow-laden for consolation. O God, we see life as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures and the soul endures, as you, O God, endure forever. We see that the years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. They weave a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of your love and glory. I ask you to please rise for the El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamatzei Menucha Lechol Nahar, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kadoshim Tohorim, Kazohar Harachim Azhirim, Et Nishmat Michael ben Moshe v'Esther, Shehalach le'olamo. Baal harachamim, yastirechu beseter kanafav le'olamim, v'yitzro b'itzro hachayim, et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanoch b'shalom, al mishkavo, v'nomar, Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, we pray that you grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Michael Montlack, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God, you are his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. The Mourner's Kaddish we continue with that basically speaks to the greatness of God. At times like this, it's hard to imagine that God in all God's infinite wisdom could take such a beloved, such an amazing person, such a person who was just so full of life. And yet, as we send our thoughts upwards, we send our love to God, and we send our love to Michael and to Michael's soul that is now at peace and at rest and at one with the one who gave us our eternal breath. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma divarach irutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'izman kariv v'meru, Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabba Mevorach Leolam Olamei Omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei D'Kudashah Barichu. La'ela min kol berchata v'shirata. Tush bechata v'nechamata. Da'amiran be'alma v'yimaru. Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba min Shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimaru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'ibromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimaru. Amen. May God grant peace to those who mourn and comfort all the bereaved among us. May the one who makes peace in the heavens help us find peace, make peace, and spread peace here on earth. And let us say, Amen. To our beloved Michael we say, Lech ki shalacha Adonai, go your way, for God has called you. Lech v'Adonai yihyeh imach, go your way, and may God be with you. V'halach lefanecha tzidkecha, kavod Adonai ya'asvecha. May your righteousness go before you, and the glory of God receive you. Let all who are gathered here repeat these words after me, speaking them to our mourners. May God console you with all who mourn in Zion and Jerusalem. And to our mourners we say, and now go forth to life and to peace. Thank you all for being here.